and welcome to Stormworks. Now, this is a bit of a weird episode, and I'll do some quick preface. We are not actually working on the crawler today. I know that the video kind of implies that we're working on the crawler. We're not. I'm explaining why we're not working on the crawler. So, as you can see, we're not in the normal work area, and this is in real time, so this is not pre-done footage. We are at the Isle of Donk. Yes, that is actually the name of the island, in case any of you who have not played Stormworks are not sure. It is in fact called the Island of Donk. The Isle of Donk miniature railway made by Buster. And no, his username is not anything special, it's literally just Buster. Now, the question is, why are we here? Well, I have not posted up last week or this week because I've been working on a bit of a special project. It's not directly related to the crawler necessarily, but it did take up some time that I would normally be using to work on the crawler project. So I apologize for that, but hopefully you guys will kind of understand why in just a moment. When I was I was doing some rough poking around at measurements, and I realized that we might want to have, if we decide to make the crawler any bigger than it already is, we might want to have a way of having the passengers also be able to go from place to place on the crawler. And I was thinking about it, and I realized we would need some sort of probably either a light railway or some sort of a people mover kind of system, if you will. And that exploration led me to a interesting project, actually, known as the Stormworks Narrow Gauge Association, or the Narrow Gauge Group, I suppose, is another way of putting it. It is formed out of a couple of people, similar to me, who are interested in trying to create a standard for narrow gauge in Stormworks. And it kind of reignited a flame under me that I had let burned out a long time ago, of trying to build a small little steam locomotive for narrow gauge that would actually look and feel like a miniature steam locomotive. And recently, probably about 2 weeks out, actually, roughly around there, is when I decided to go ahead and try and kind of restart that project. And it led me to what we're talking about today, which is my project. Now, as you can see, I've got a flying crane. This is the Lift Tech. I don't remember who created it. I'll put a link in the description, though. Which I've used to carry these two containers over. And I know that they look kind of weird. I'm going to be repainting them eventually so they don't look like weird faces. But that being said, this is actually the steam locomotive. And I know it doesn't look like much, but there's a reason for that. The steam locomotive that I designed is meant to be used across, theoretically, any of the narrow gauge railways you will find in Stormworks, meaning that it has to have a way of moving from railway to railway. So I decided to do so by putting them in literally the storage containers. I did screw up, however. These are not the 1.0 storage containers. These are AISO, the alternative ISO standard. So just keep aware if you decide to download this, and there will be a download link in the description, don't worry. If you decide to download this and play around with it, just be aware that they do require the AISO, not the standard ISO. But that being said, what exactly are we looking at? Well, we're looking at the tender and locomotive, and you'll see that I've already got one kind of lined up for the tracks. And I actually have these little two paint blocks right here that you can see, which is used to kind of line up the track inside the container with the actual track of the railway. And it's a bit of an interesting process getting them in and out because you have to swap out these two containers, but essentially there's a way you have to do this, and I know it seems kind of stupid, but there is. That's because the tender needs to be unloaded first, and I do have signs on both of them that says what is in there and which one to unload first. There is a small door on the same side. I accidentally locked that door in with the bumper, but we'll go with it. There's also upper and lower connector releases on this side. You've got some magulls, which is right below. Oh, there we go. Right below the button for the door. And speaking of which, let us open up the door. So you can see it folds out and has this little ramp to allow for the tender to come out. Now you'll see that there's also these 3 buttons. Realistically, you only need one of them if you're unloading, but you can use the other 2 if you really want. The 2 on top and bottom, the extend winch and retract winch, is actually mostly meant for putting the tender or locomotive back into the container, and the locomotive container has the exact same set of controls as well as this one. So let us go ahead and release connector. That means that this is now free to move outside of the winch. So let's go ahead and detach winch, store cable. Now I'm going to go ahead and push this out. You can theoretically also pull it out, but I find pushing it is a lot better. So let us go ahead and push it fully out. And it kind of has a run out on the slope here. Not a whole lot I can do about that, sadly, but it at least is able to pull in it or get in and out. So let me kind of push this a bit farther away. Put on the emergency brakes. And then start the arduous task of swapping these 2 containers out. So let's go ahead and close that up. And then I'm going to actually time lapse me putting these in and out because it's a bit of a process. All right. So now that we've got this container in place, and again, using those 2 gray blocks to kind of line everything up, we are able to pull out the locomotive. And the unloading setup for the locomotive is very similar as well. Just open the door. And you kind of have to walk around the locomotive in order to get to where you want to, but you can also just release connector. This you don't need to unhook outside of the conductor, thankfully. So see, that is fully disconnected. Go ahead and push it backwards. Now you may notice that it kind of sometimes will get stuck about halfway out. If that occurs, just hook it up to the tender, and that will typically be able to kind of force it backwards enough for it to pull itself out of the container. Let me go ahead and move that. I'm going to actually push everything backwards a small bit. Let me open this up. Come on. Work with me here. There we go. Okay. And time to move this container out of the way. So now that we've got our 2 containers kind of out of the way, let me really quickly walk you through the containers before we actually get to the locomotive itself. As you may have noticed, there were solar panels on both of these. That is because if we pop into either one of these, let's go with the tender, you'll see that there's a giant just set of batteries. Let me actually also equip this radio. There's just a giant set of batteries just kind of hanging out in here. This is, well, okay. The locomotive is not actually steam powered. As much as I wish it was, there's 2 problems with that. First of all, steam doesn't work in Stormworks, ironically enough, considering how you get Stormworks at this point in time. But steam does not work, and B, I had trouble putting in a diesel engine into the locomotive or the tender. And if you really want to figure out what I mean by I had a lot of trouble, I invite you to go check out pictures I have posted uh, down in the narrow gauge Discord, the Narrow Gauge Association's Discord, which there will be a link down in the description if you want to join. And I highly, highly, highly implore you to go check it out. There's some really neat people in there, including Buster, the creator of this railway. But I posted pictures on how that worked, and it really didn't. So this is actually what's called an outline, which means that it is looks like one locomotive when it's actually a different type. Oh, there's a part I missed on painting it. Whoops. I'll have to do that before I release this, because this is not yet released. It will, as of filming this, which is about 4:14 on my end, this is not yet up on the workshop, but it will be released about the exact same time that this video is released. So there should be a link down in the description also on how to get this if you want to play around with it as well. So that being said, how does it work? Well, it's purely electric. This entire tender is almost chock full of just batteries, and the majority of the locomotive is actually also full of batteries. So in order to get this to actually work, we have to kind of do a small bit of setup on this end as well. So let me go ahead and close this. And for those of you that are wondering about these panel doors, this locomotive is inspired by the 15-inch gauge railroads that you will often find in the UK, Great Britain, such as, let's see, Ravenglass and Eskel is one. Romney, Hythe, and Dymchurch is another, where normally the fireman and engineer sit in the tender itself, or stand. Either works, I suppose. And all the controls are right in the cab, which I have rather faithfully recreated. At least I'd like to believe I faithfully recreated this. So that's kind of why you see these panel doors, is because that's how you get in and out. And it's also to stop you from accidentally falling out if you don't want to sit down. So the controls for this is actually pretty simple, and I've listed most of them, so hopefully they're pretty clear. So you've got your speed, you have bell. Hopefully you can hear that. If not, I invite you to go download this and listen to what I've amounted to a bell. Cab lights, which turn on the two lights and also illuminate these two indicators. There we go. Headlights, which turn on the two headlights on front, which you may have seen. Emergency brakes, which work very similar to how the emergency brakes work on this. It just turns the brakes on the sliders. You've got your brake, which is a variable brake, and I'll explain how that works in just a second. You have your reverser, and then you have your regulator. The two indicators are your speed, which is in meters per second, which at a flat surface, the locomotive has about a top speed of just around 20 meters per second. So it's pretty fast, actually. And then you've got your water level, aka the batteries. And you'll notice that the red is slightly different than the white. The white level indicator is your charged batteries, or like your running batteries, and your red line is your emergency batteries. And those are essentially the ones that are actually running everything, technically speaking. And they're being recharged continuously by the main batteries. And as you can see, if we pull up our enhanced visuals, you can see just how that's all working. Again, also the backup, quote unquote, the backup batteries, or the main charge batteries, are hooked into the electrical for the tender as well, which has a similar setup where there's main batteries and then the backup batteries. Backup batteries actually being the ones driving everything. So let's actually kind of start heading out, shall we? You can see just how this all works. So reverser is set to backwards, and you can see crack open the regulator, and we start moving. You notice that the battery level is going down pretty quickly. That is actually a fault on my end. I'm still trying to figure out just how the chargers fully work. So as of the moment, this will be fixed theoretically as soon as this is all uploaded. But for the moment, I'll just go ahead and put on the infinite electrics, and I'll also turn down the volume because that humming drives me nuts. Um, that humming is the two, well, four, I suppose, driving wheels on the locomotive. They are not driving the train, however. They are just for show, and they were, well, let's just say I spent a fair bit of time trying to get them as close as I could to, like, actual movement speed. So, but as we trundle along, we are going over our first spring-loaded switch. Looks like I got through that just fine, thankfully. I will let you know that if you decide to download this, it struggles a small bit on those spring-loaded switches going backwards. Forwards, it doesn't seem to have any problem. Going backwards, it can sometimes bug out, and hopefully I will get to show you how to deal with that. But let's go ahead and increase speed. We can start on our merry journey. So as we kind of pick up speed, and I kind of sit down, you'll notice that the locomotive kind of rocks back and forth a small bit. That's mostly due to the driving wheels. But on the flip side, as somebody who actually owns and operates a steam locomotive, I can tell you this is actually very accurate to how a steam locomotive works. It trundles a lot like this. So I like to think of it as a feature instead of a bug. So you can see we're picking up a fair bit of speed. We're about 18 meters per second. You'll notice that there is no whistle on this right now. I'm still working out a method to have a somewhat realistic sounding whistle. So until then, you'll just have to deal with the bell, sadly. I'm working on it, but I don't have a way of fitting in a foghorn into this somewhere. As is, I've already got a fair bit of space taken up by stuff. So now, as you notice, you'll see there's two additional things kind of hidden under the tender. Those are actually how this is being propelled. Thanks to a idea by, I don't remember who, but somebody on the Discord decided to try a design of a locomotive using what's called drive tires, where you're using wheels essentially to move along the track, which you'll find a lot in model locomotives. And in this case, it's in the tender, and that's actually what's propelling us. That is also how the variable brake works, is that I'm setting the brake value on those two wheels underneath the tender that are driving us. So as we get closer, let me kind of speed up. I found that going about just under 6 miles per hour works, or meters per second works best going over the switch points, or spring-loaded switches. Switch points. That's literally a oh Jesus, I can't even think of what it's called anymore. Anyways, sorry, my brain's going off on its own. As you can see, if it's not going against the spring, which means that it's going through how it's normally set up to go through, it does it pretty well, actually. It's just going against the spring that it has trouble, meaning that it's switching back onto the normal track. And it's possible this might glitch out here, and you get to see how this all works. I'm not sure if it will, though. It's kind of a 50-50 chance on if it glitches out or not, I found. No, it seems to work correctly that time. I'm actually kind of impressed. That's better than how it normally would be during testing. So let's go ahead and set the reverser to forward. Oops. Take off the brake and open up the regulator. So as we're moving, you'll notice that there's a little like connection port on top of the tender. If I get up, I kind of hop up, you'll see that this is actually an electrical cable anchor, and this is how you recharge the tender. Supposedly, if I set it up correctly, if you charge up the tender, it'll also charge up the locomotive. However, in case that doesn't work correctly, there is a secondary charger in Locomotive that as soon as we get to the containers, I will show you how that all works. But let's go ahead and kind of increase our speed. See if I can get it to glitch out. Nope. Again, it seems to work just fine going forwards. It's just going backwards that it struggles with for some reason. So as you can see, there's moderate amount of visibility actually if you're sitting down. And it's close to the same amount of visibility you would get if you're standing up. Come on, stand up, please. Thank you. It's pretty close to the same amount of visibility you'd get standing up. Crouching, you can't really see anything, I found. Which is pretty accurate to what you've got going on. But if you stand on top of the seats, you get great visibility going forward, which is very similar to how it is in the real thing. So, again, top speed of about 20. I think it looks rather nice. So a couple of weird quirks I've noticed about the Locomotive outside of the it getting kind of stuck going against the switches. It will sometimes just kind of stop all of a sudden, especially if it's going around curves. It'll just suddenly like stop or like drastically slow down all of a sudden. I think it has something to do with how the wheel configuration is set up, but I'm not fully certain on that, so don't quote me. But if you experience that, don't worry. I can't figure out what's exactly causing it, so that's totally normal. Let's go ahead and slow down as we enter into our station here. I have not yet tested this on... I've tested this thing religiously on the miniature rail line here, what we're currently on. I have not yet tested it on the military railroad that was released by... I don't remember what his Steam name is anymore either, for that matter, but if you go onto the Discord, it's right up there. It's very clear. It's also on the Reddit, because yes, we do have a Reddit, but I do not know what the link is off the top of my head, so I will go ahead and post it up in the description down below. So, that being said, I do not know how well it deals with super tight curves that supposedly exist on the military, because whenever I tested it, it kept crashing my game. So, yeah, not the best, but supposedly it works. So in terms of recharging this, again, you've got the one on top. Let's go ahead and actually turn off infinite electric so you can see just how the recharging process works. So if we hover over this, you can see that the primary, or the backup batteries, I suppose, are slowly going down, and the primary, I'm flipping my words here. The quote-unquote backup batteries, or the charging batteries, which are listed as primary, are going down, and the secondary, which are the ones that are actually powering all the controls, are going up. But what happens when you run out of the primary, which we're going to probably see sooner rather than later. So there's two ways of doing it. Again, the backup batteries / primary batteries and the tenders should be hooked up to the ones in the Locomotive. But barring that not working correctly, you should, and if you need to just recharge them in general, you go into here, and there's an electrical cable in both this container and also the other container. So the one for the Locomotive, you will need to unhook the one for the Locomotive because it's already hooked into a winch, but you just need to unhook it and all's fine and dandy. And then you go to these electrical cable anchors. There's one on either side of both of these containers. And you just drag this cable over. You just hook it into the tender. And now this thing should be charging back up. If we hover over this, we can see that it's slightly charging. That might be actually due to the fact that it's trying to charge up the main batteries as well currently. I don't know if it charges quite as quickly as it's supposed to. But let's go here and we can double check. No, it is not charging apparently. So that might be because of how the electrical chargers work. I found some really weird bugs. I don't know if they're actually bugs or they're features regarding the electrical chargers. But I will need to kind of fix stuff in order to get that working again. But that being said, you can find a cable in there, and then for this cable, it is the one right in front, which is actually connecting right here. And then here's the battery cell for this this container. So that's all charging up. So the question is, how do we charge the locomotive directly? Well, you go around front, and you see this little button here. You just open it right up, and there's your connector. So it's just nicely hidden inside the locomotive very clearly. And of course, you've got your electrical connector in front and in back. Those should be also hooked up to the primary batteries, but I would need to verify on that just to make sure that that works correctly. And I don't have any train cars to verify with that just yet. So that's that. So as I mentioned, this will be up on the workshop right about the same time this video gets officially released. Hopefully most of these, oh good lord, most of these bugs will be fixed by the time that it is back up on the workshop. And if not, I'm planning on putting out a couple of updates anyways, so that's no problem. And hopefully you enjoy this, and hopefully you go ahead and download it. And if you're interested in joining our little kind of growing community, there will be a Discord link down in the description. We invite you to go ahead and hop on, join us, and experience the wonders that is what we're doing. And if you kind of enjoyed this, or you just want to see more of the crawler, which normally I'd be uploading, I request that you subscribe, as always, and hit that bell icon so you get notified that there is a new video that has been posted up. And of course, that is both for the crawler series and Project Atla. For those of you that are interested, Project Atla is my attempt at building a big name theme park version ride of Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you're interested in that, make sure to check that out. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.